Treasury, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and numerous other financial regulatory agencies. He is also a member of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. As a subcommittee chairman, Congressman McHenry is at the heart of the Financial Services Committee's effort to make the federal bureaucracy more accountable for how it spends the American people's money. Most importantly, Congressman McHenry continues to listen to the voters of the 10th District and act as their voice in Washington. His main focus is to provide the highest level of constituent services at home in Western North Carolina. Prior to being elected to Congress in 2004, at the age of 29, Patrick represented the 109th District in the North Carolina House of Representatives. He also served as Special Assistant to the Secretary of the United States Department of Labor, a post he was appointed to by President Bush. Patrick is a graduate of Ashbrook High School in Gastonia, North Carolina, and Belmont Abbey College, where he earned a Bachelor of Arts in History. Congressman McHenry and his wife, Julia, I knew that spelling would throw me, and his wife Julia live in Denver, North Carolina, and worship at the Holy Spirit Catholic Church. They're expecting their first child, a daughter. My notes here said this August, but I learned this morning it's in about 2 weeks. And I want to do in about 2 weeks? Yeah, very. About 2 weeks. So he could be called out of the meeting, in the next 15 minutes. We don't know. I'm going to go ahead and do the rules, and I'll bring on Patrick, Congressman. If you would like to ask a question, please move towards one of the aisles after the Congressman's opening remarks. Out of respect for everyone, please be patient. Many of you will have questions, and the Congressman will try to get to everyone as quickly as he can while answering everyone's questions. Because of time, please limit yourself to one question. Please try to keep it to less than a minute. If you don't get to ask a question, there are members of his staff available to take your question or concern or forms for your interview. Also, in order to protect your privacy, if you have a specific casework issue, that is a problem with Social Security, disability, or veterans benefits, or something like that, please see one of the Congressman's staff members so they can get your information. Of course, let's have a respectful interchange this afternoon. Please join me in welcoming your Congressman, Patrick McHenry.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Thanks for a warm introduction. Thank you all for being here today. As Joe mentioned, my wife is due on August 19th with our first child, and so we're obviously anxious new parents or expecting parents. So we wanted to have town hall meetings, and in fact, my wife insisted that I have town hall meetings, even if it may not work because of the schedule if I get called away. But she told me that as long as she's taken care of, we're fine. So I'm learning the process of being a dad as well in this, that I don't matter quite as much. But I'm excited about the prospects, and obviously very excited that Julia's healthy and the baby is healthy. So anyway, and to that end, that's why we had a little schedule change this year to have daytime town hall meetings, and thank you all for making it out during the day. I know it's not easy, but I appreciate your feedback and want to hear from you. And we're going to get to questions, and when the time comes, I'll explain where we line up. It'll be over here, just so y'all know, and I'll let y'all know. But I want to give you a little context for the conversation today, and my way of trying to view the issues and challenges we see in Washington. You obviously have your questions. We're going to get to your questions, and I want to hear from you, and we can talk through a bunch of issues as we go along. But I just want to give you a little bit about how I try to view issues as they come along. And we have so many issues that are of extreme importance to our nation and to our people, to our community, and to our future. And for me, though, I try to focus not on what the politics are saying of the moment. Right now, the politics of the moment are focused on that top 1% and those that are on the other end of the scale. And it seems like that's where all the political discussion is these days, just on those two ends of the spectrum. Well, my focus and how I try to view every issue that comes before me is how it affects that family right in the middle. Right in the middle. If you look at all the statistics over the last 20 years, if you compare the median family in this country, the family where half people make less than them, half people make more than them. If you look at that family, they make about what they made in 1989. This year, they make about what they made in 1989. The cost of everything, though, has gone up. You think about housing, you think about the price of gas at the pumps, you talk about home heating, all those things are more expensive. You go to the grocery store, and a gallon of milk has far outstripped what is that median family, that family in the middle, can afford to pay for. And so you think about food, energy, housing, education. You think about all these pressing issues that we have and that family in the middle is experiencing. And so while we have a lot of political debate in Washington about a number of things that are important, absolutely important, it misses the point about what is happening to that family in the middle. And that's been my focus, is to really think about that family in the middle and what they're experiencing on a daily basis. And when you're driving your kids to school, you don't really care about the underlying principles of school choice and the ideological differences between the left and the right and the debate about teacher salary. You just want to have a good teacher in the classroom, and you want to have good outcomes for your child and make sure they're able to get in a good school, which can lead to a good job. You don't really care about a big debate in Raleigh or in Washington. You just care about making sure you deliver for your child. And so, while we have a lot of big debates, let's focus on what's important, what I think is important. And there's a lot of insecurity for families in this country. I mean, how many of y'all know of people that are still haven't found full-time work to replace the job they lost? Do y'all know people like this? I know people like this. Friends, neighbors, family members. And when people lose full-time work and replace it with part-time work, while we're grateful for that, that doesn't make things better. It means that things are less bad. Until that person can get a full-time job and replace that full-time job, even if the benefits aren't as good, we need to make sure that they can have benefits. They can have the same access to care that they want for health care, the ability to contribute to the community, to the children's education, to their family. So those are the things that I just want to mention to you, is the way I try to view these issues. Now, you all have questions, and that's what town halls are about, is an opportunity for you all to ask questions and to get answers, or to make your comment. And so if y'all would line up right over here, we'll just try to take people in an orderly fashion if we can. If you're not able to stand for long periods, if you just raise your hand, we'll come to you and try to be fair to everyone along the process. I think we have enough chairs too that if so how's that? I'm small, but it's not a big enough staff to help, right? So if I could ask if you'll say your name, where you're from, and then make a question or comment, and then I'll do my best to answer.
Bob Forbes, I'm from far away, Fairview. Okay. Glad to see you and happy to be able to get a chance to address you. I only have about 6 things here, but I can't go that many, I know. First off, I have to say, this is about the worst time in the United States that I can ever remember myself or hear about. And I know it's very difficult for you, as for the people here, because we're not going to be a third class, we're going to be a fourth class nation soon. And that's the feeling of what they're trying to do, okay? The main thing I have here is you weren't able to stop Obamacare. You had a majority. So that means that half of the Republicans are not Republicans. And that's what's happening. Yes, I know you have the Senate to deal with. But why are we not able to take care of a simple thing like that? And here we have major issues hitting us, such as people crossing the borders. That is something that, you know, we can't afford our own food. Yet they're going to give these people places to stay. And I think we're going to be quiet.
Okay. Well, I'll try to address both. First, the Democrat Party had a majority in the U.S. House, the U.S. Senate, and the White House, and they passed Obamacare. It was a partisan vote, and the president has a law that basically named after him now, right? I mean, even he's referring to it as Obamacare. It's Affordable Care Act is what it was entitled. Now, in order to repeal that, you actually have to have a law passed through the House, the Senate, and signed by the president, or you have to have sufficient numbers to override the president's veto. We do not have that. And it is very frustrating for me when we pass good bills, good legislation out of the House of Representatives, and it goes to the Senate, and it withers on the vine and dies in the Senate. And so the frustrating thing for me is when we have nearly 350 bills that have been passed, and 98% of them have been passed in a bipartisan way out of the House of Representatives. Yet the Senate doesn't take it up. So your frustration that we haven't been able to repeal Obamacare, I share with you. I share with you. And we've tried multiple times. There'll be those of a different political persuasion that will bring up the number of votes that we've had to repeal Obamacare. We've succeeded on 7 of those items. 7, only 7 out of that. Now, I'm going to keep working to make sure that we deal with healthcare in a rational way and try to make sure that we have sensible reforms. But we need some help in the Senate. We need to have some people that are willing to look at facts as they are and say that this is a broken law, and healthcare is even more broken now than it was before it was passed. The border. Anybody else have questions about the border?
I'm going to jump on it.
All right. Well, then I'll let you jump on it and leave my answer there. That's all right? Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, my name is Danny Roberts from Atlanta. I'd like to thank you for your vote on the border amendment and the other amendments you just went through.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now to get to my question. I got a big mouth. When it comes up for a vote, you're going to vote to can't read it even myself, this has to be the export and import bank bill. And we want to know why or why not you would vote for that import-export bill.
Oh, okay. Okay. I thought you were going to ask about the border. I was holding back on the border.
That was just thanking you for that, buddy.
Yeah, okay. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. About the Export-Import Bank. First of all, this is what they refer to as an export credit program. And a number of other countries around the world have a similar bank funded by their federal governments, the Chinese, the Europeans, almost all the European countries have some version of that. And what I think is we need to get out of the business of markets and banking system in the world, and that money should be available in the private sector to fund these operations. However, we have to face reality as it is now, and when all the other countries around the world are competing with American goods and services, and yet their governments are providing this type of credit to their native businesses, what we have to do is get an agreement, I think. When we have trade agreements around the globe, we need to make sure that they respect my goal is to make sure our trade agreements respect our jobs and are in the best interest of the American people. And what's in the best interest of the American people is we get this agreement that if they stop, we will stop. And I think that's the long term. I think in the short term, we have to have major reforms to the Ex-Im Bank. And I think it's gone far beyond what it should be doing. And it should be helping small businesses, not just simply big businesses. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here today.
No, there we go.
Thank you for being here today, Congressman. And tying it into that, helping small businesses. Years ago, the Rural Electrification Administration was designed to foster growth in startups in rural areas for utilities such as telephone and electric. Today, Rural Utility Service Broadband Program prohibits the startups from accessing funds to provide broadband service. This hurts the less populated and more rural areas where the incumbents are not willing to go because they see it as not economically friendly. What is being done to ensure that the Federal Communications Commission and the Rural Utility Service are not favoring incumbents in the broadband industry and thus limiting or even prohibiting competition from new startups and more dynamic companies, especially in the less populated areas?
It's a very specific question. Because you're an expert in the area.
If there is a critical need, and if we talk about the middle family, we're talking about the middle family there. No, we have to.
Oh, no. But on this matter, the FCC is making very bad policy at the moment.
Correct.
And what we need to do is ensure that we inject more competition into this marketplace and not allow a government subsidized or a government advantaged agency greater access to what the private sector or small businesses have. We've talked about this before.
Right.
And so we have, for instance, all those bills, when you say your cell phone is $29 a month for this whatever plan, and the bill comes in and it's $38.54 or something crazy. Well, all those little additional things, right, are fees that we pay the government, right? We have a fee that they instituted to pay for the Spanish-American War. Anyone serve in that? Right? Right? So they instituted this fee 100 years ago, and yet we're still paying it today. And then once they stopped that going to fund that war, they used it to build out rural telephone, right? And so, sure, that was a great program in its time, in its place, to make sure rural communities had access to telephones and rural communities had access to electricity. Very important things at the time. We are far beyond that. And so what they've done is we have one fee that is for the hearing impaired. Right? How many of y'all have teenagers? Right? Okay. How many of you actually talk to your teenager on the telephone? Right. They text. Right? And so we're spending money to give hearing impaired people cell phones and then TV machines to translate for them. When there's a better answer, there's an advance in technology that is far cheaper than what the government's doing. So there are a number of examples in this whole program of really electricity and broadband and cell phones and all this other stuff. So I'm with you, and I believe sincerely that we've got to shake things up and make sure that we don't accept the status quo.
Yeah, because what's happening now is the monies are available to the big boys, but the startups are totally restricted, and it needs to be that way, because the big boys are not coming in. So, thank you.
My name is Richard West, and what I wanted to ask you about a little bit is Howard First, the House of Representatives, is supposed to have. It seems to me that the government is way out of debt, everything we look at, I think it's unsustainable. And yet, and the bureaucrats come up there, you ask them a question about where the money goes, they stonewall you guys. There's no guys can't seem to get together, and you don't need the Senate, you don't need the President, you just can decide not to fund things. Nobody does that. Why is that?
Well, because, yes. In the Constitution, it says the power to tax originates in the House of Representatives, under the Constitution. And by tradition, spending originates in the House of Representatives. However, in order to, if you're committed to defunding a program, you're therefore committed to having a government shutdown and then suffering the consequences of the government shutdown. In order to eliminate a program, you still have to have, you can't simply refuse to fund that one program. Everything gets tied up in all of the funding of government. And so you have to have both the House, the Senate, and the President sign off on that. That's the challenge. A number of people raise this issue and say that the House of Representatives, the power of the purse is in the House of Representatives, which is not true. It's also in the Senate. The co-equal, they're a co-equal body within in the legislative branch, and so the fact that we are doing reasonable and good things in the House of Representatives doesn't mean, well, I believe it's reasonable and good things. Not everybody does, obviously, but it also means that the Senate has to go along with it. And last September, look, I mean, the government shutdown was, I think, bad policy. It was not the best way to have a negotiation about the long-term funding needs of our government. We have to have serious conversations about our long-term funding needs. Absolutely. We have priorities that are very important that we fund. But we are spending way too much on way too many things that are not delivering. And when we have a government that spends $3.5 trillion annually, you can't have any body, right? The House, the Senate, the presidency, no one has the capacity to understand every dime within the federal government, right? That's problematic, and that's why we have frivolous spending and wasteful spending. And we've got to get back on the train of looking at the bottom to the top. And each year we have to start from zero and justify every penny that we're spending, that we're taking from the American people and spending. And if we're spending beyond that, then you have to ask a deeper question. Is this program so important that I'm going to take money from my grandchildren to pay for it? Am I going to take money from the Chinese in order to pay for it? I think most of the answer is no. And so we've got to have some consensus to do that. And you're informed on this, and I wish the broad public understood the ins and outs of the budget, and if they did, they would be outraged and demand results and demand change.
Where I would see is that a shutdown may be necessary to bring to bear the pressure to get you guys serious about it. I just don't think there is any more seriousness about it.
Well, I'm serious about it. I've voted for a balanced budget every year I've been in Congress.
My name is Drew West, and I live in Asheville. I just would like to say, Mr. Congressman, thank you for everything you've done, representing your district. God bless you, serve all your constituents well. Not only your constituents, but my generation all across the country, because you not only serve your constituents in the 10th, but you serve the whole nation.
Thank you.
But my question is, I appreciate your support for House Resolution 5272. Definitely appreciate that. It's great. But my question is, what is the next step in immigration?
Well, first of all, what we just passed out of the House of Representatives said a couple basic things. And let me outline that, because that tells you where we need to go. There's been this big debate in Washington about comprehensive immigration reform. And I've said from the get-go that the American people don't trust Congress to write a big bill. The last big bill we had was Dodd-Frank. The previous one to that was Obamacare. The previous one to that spent $1 trillion on the stimulus. Right? Just putting together one big bill is not a reasonable approach. So we need to have a step-by-step approach when it comes to immigration. Even if you disagree with me on the policy, on health care and on financial regulation and government spending, think about this. I've said repeatedly that we don't have a secure southern border. okay? This is not surprising to anyone, right? We have a system, and look, we're an immigrant people, right? We're an immigrant people. The only natives to our country are Native Americans and Indians, right? So think about it. We're all, so outside of that, we're all immigrants. So respectful of that, and respectful that we welcome people to this country legally, we have to know who's here. So in order to address the current crisis at the border, and it is a crisis at the border, we passed legislation on Friday that did a couple very straightforward things. Number one, it said, call it the National Guard. This is a crisis. We have a border crisis. Call it the National Guard. They can be of assistance to the Border Patrol. Number two, it says that we have to change the 2008 law that is drawing in Central American children to take that perilous, risky, and extraordinarily dangerous journey in order to come to the southern border of the United States. Their families are paying a large fee, and those children are taking enormous and heartbreaking risks. We have to change that law and treat those Central American children the way we treat Canadian and Mexican children, which is we give them a free trip home. We send them back. So, number three, in order to do that, you have to have judges there at the border so you can make the determination on who these kids are and where to send them. So we have to fund that. The fourth thing is that we allow the Border Patrol to actually access federal lands that are at the border. We have a national monument, which is just simply a protected area of land that touches it, abuts the southern border. Under current law, the Border Patrol is not allowed to patrol on those lands. That, to me, is an outrage. So we changed the law so the Border Patrol can actually access those lands. Very simple. Those that are coming into the country illegally know that that's an easy access point. It's very simple, right? They may be coming here illegally, but they're not dumb, right? They see where the opportunity is to come in. So we changed those four things. In order to do that, you actually have to fund it. The other thing we do is we say that the president should not be able to take action beyond the bounds of the law. We take action when it comes to that. And he has an executive memorandum that outlines that he will not take action against a group of illegals that are in the country. We say that it's counter to the law. We have to go a little further now beyond this, which is to make sure we have a secure perimeter at the border, that we also clean up the process by which people come here legally. Because people that do want to come in and participate in our society, that are doing it legally, right, that don't have a criminal background check, don't have a criminal record, a number of these very basic things that our ancestors went through, and that every country around the world demands you do. We should clean that process up so it's logical and it's fair to those that want to come here legally, and also fair to those that did already come here legally. Very basic things. We have to go step by step on this, though, with sensible pieces of legislation that the American people, as well as members of Congress, can read and understand. The bill we passed on Friday night was 42 pages long. You can pull it up on the internet, you can make the determination on whether or not you thought it was the right vote or the wrong vote, and you can hold me accountable. If you have a 1,000-page bill on the internet, good luck. Right? It's not good for anyone. Then you can say, well, what about this provision? I can say, well, I didn't support that. Right? That's not fair and just. We need to have sensible legislation that's reasonable, informed, and fast. So, thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, Sheila Surratt, downtown Nashville. Speaking of the border, these kids are coming in illegally. They have diseases. What is being done about each person getting treatment and immunization? I mean, they're piled up in rooms. and it's disgusting. So are these children and people all getting their immunizations that they need so they won't be spreading these diseases around?
Yes.
Each one?
And look, I mean, well, the thing is, we don't know their immunization history. It could be it's better than mine. We just don't know what that is. So, we shouldn't make that judgment. But we should be very concerned about the public health aspect. And the folks that we have at the border right now have an extraordinary, are very adept. We have very high caliber folks there that are working, and we're treating these children humanely as we want to treat our own family members. And that's, I think, what we're called on to do. It is a crisis, but it's a crisis of where it's a crisis, but these are children at play. With teenagers, some that may be 17, 18 years old, but we also have young children involved here. We need to make sure we treat them humanely and then return them to their family, because that is the most humane thing we can do.
So you all are working on getting these kids
Yes.
back to where they came from?
Yes, that's why we
Their
passed.
parents need to be held accountable. Thanks.
Hey, I'm Bill Punch, I'm from Riceville, just over the hill.
Hi.
First of all, congratulations on having a daughter. I've got two. You're very lucky. Any turn south. Okay. Somewhat insulting. 50-plus times you voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Really throws your credibility out the window on the subject. There's lots of legislation that should have been passed, and I guess I'll get right to the point. My bottom line here was dealing with the crisis on the border right now. These children come from, one of the countries has national health care, and their immunization rate is higher than the rate of Texas, of the children in Texas. So that shouldn't be such a concern.
Which country is that?
I'm not sure which one. I think it's Guatemala, but I wouldn't know. But while we're on the subject of Guatemala, let's point out that we have some responsibility for what's happened. The history goes back to the middle of the last century. Guatemala in particular, the one I researched, so I'll get the data on it. Guatemala had a democratically elected president who was replaced by another democratically elected president, and then was overthrown by the CIA in 1954. Since then, we've sent death squads to this region. We've educated the death squads of the war colony to do it. The main reason there's so much violence in that country, those countries, and that what these children are fleeing, and they should be considered children, and I think they ought to be given refugee status. Again, because we must bear some responsibility to this. The main reason there's violence there is because of the drug culture in this country. They're fighting to supply drugs, and we're the main market for that. So to take these kids and think that they're, I don't know what kind of monsters that most people think they are. They're children who are asking the greatest country in the world for some help. They are asking to be placed with relatives in a large part, and they want our help. If we send them back, they'll face the death squads, and they probably won't make it. Immigration reform could have helped with this problem. The immigration reform bill was passed in the Senate, and it hasn't been brought to a vote in the House of Representatives. And my understanding is that Speaker Boehner will not bring this to the floor for reasons that I'd like you to elaborate on. Been accused of the Tea Party keeping him from doing anything on comprehensive immigration reform. And my question is, are you part of that group that's preventing him from bringing that to the floor? If no, what can be done to get, there's a bill that had bipartisan support in the Senate, has bipartisan support in the House, would pass if it were brought to the floor, would solve a lot of the immigration problems, but nothing's being done. Are you part of that group? If not, what can be done to?
Well, as I said, immigration reform needs to be a step-by-step approach, and putting it in one big bill does not build credibility,
You
does not
can't get
address
different parts, you can't get people to agree on it. That's just a
So
compromise.
what people
If
are-
you put this one bill, one part of the bill, you put this part of the bill, and these two groups can come together. If you do it one at a time, this other group's not going to agree to vote for that. So there is something to be said for large bills.
A large bill is enabled, what you're outlining is saying you have to put it in a big bill because I don't support provisions within that big bill, which is actually one of the reasons why I don't support that big bill, is there are provisions in there that I don't see are right and just. For instance, you put people that are coming in here illegally today ahead of those that are waiting online in their native countries and doing it legally. I think that's wrong. I don't think that's the right approach. You also allow people that have criminal records that are here illegally to also get permanent status. I think that's problematic. There are a number of problematic pieces in the Senate bill, and it's not that I don't support reforming the system or fixing the border problem. It's that I don't think putting it together in a huge bill is the right approach. I sincerely agree. I believe that. We have a difference of opinion and approach on that. I respect your opinion, though. But what is clear out of this current crisis is that when you have this magnet that says if you come here illegally, you will then get legal status. Well, people will come here illegally in order to get that status. And what we have at our border right now is a humanitarian crisis. And I concur with you. These children should be treated as children. We have some folks that are not children that are coming through the border, and that is a problem. Gang members, those with that are connected to the drug culture you mentioned, right? That's a problem, and that's a matter of, I think, national security. And it's the federal government that has the authority, as all governments or regimes around the world do, to police their own borders and to know who is in their country. So there is obviously a lot at stake here. But what I would prefer to do is to cut that bill up into a number of reasonable approaches. You can do a border bill. You can do a bill that actually deals with visas and the process by which people come here legally. That system currently is not just. It is not fair to those that are seeking to do it, which means you have a greater desire to come here illegally in the hopes of legalized status than actually going through that very difficult and confusing and expensive process. So there's a lot of give in this, but you have to begin with dealing with the current crisis. That's my approach, and look, we can have a difference of opinion, and I certainly appreciate you giving me your view and appreciate you listening to mine. Thank you.
My name is George Kushner. I'm a resident of Arden. I spoke and asked about the Marketplace Fairness Act the last time we had a town meeting, and you had obviously seen the movie because you did the sidestep move very, very well. In Texas, the biggest little in Texas. And you knew how to
Well,
do the
it's a
sidestep.
daytime meeting, and we're already being called names, so.
You did the sidestep. Remember the movie, the governor did the sidestep? I want to compliment.
That, as well as the CIA piece, were before my time. Although Dolly Parton is a wonderful, honorable person.
You knew the movie. I never mentioned Dolly Parton. You knew the movie, didn't you?
So, go ahead with your question. Sorry.
I want to compliment you for having these meetings, having the courage to do it. And I want to compliment this group for not being antagonistic and demonstrating listening properly. Having said that, except for a couple of people, this looks like an AARP meeting. But that's okay.
But I think there are a handful of the crowd that are very offended.
I said except
Sorry, go right ahead, sir.
Let's talk about the Marketplace Fairness Act.
Okay.
Many of you people probably don't know what that is. But it's a law that passed the Senate overwhelmingly with bipartisan support. It has been sent in, and this was in, I think, May of 2013 it passed. It's been languishing in committee in the House ever since. It would require internet purveyors to collect sales tax to level the playing field from local brick and mortar facilities that are now required to collect sales tax. Okay? Now, recently, last month, the National Governors Convention in Nashville, Tennessee, almost unanimously endorsed the Marketplace Fairness Act. You're probably familiar with that.
No, I was not aware of that. Let me ask one, go ahead, and ask your question,
Okay.
sorry.
And it was both Republican and Democratic support. And to get to the bottom line, I'm sure you voted on the bill for internet access to permanently extend that bill. You don't remember voting for it?
The only bill that we dealt with was the permanent status for a tax-free internet, meaning
Yes.
you can't tax access to the internet.
That's the bill that's going to expire November the 1st. And if you didn't do that, it would have expired, and people would have been taxed for the ability to access the internet. Very, very likely. Now, the Senate, when they got that bill, they saw an opportunity to tie in the Marketplace Fairness Act with that. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a bill that has not come out of committee yet in the Senate, but it probably will, that will extend the Marketplace Fairness Act to, I believe, 2024, the Internet Act to 2024. And the Marketplace Fairness Act will be part of that bill. You're aware of that?
That's an idea that people are floating, but I don't.
It's got a bill number.
That's great, but there are about 5,500 bills that are filed, so people have a lot of ideas. But get your question.
Will you vote for that bill if it comes to you? Yes or no?
Since I have not read it, I'm not going to tell you one way or the other.
You're in favor of extending the Internet Bill Act, right? Extending the exemption on Internet tax.
So let me try to answer your question. Okay. So the first piece is a federal ban that states, municipalities, and the federal government cannot tax accessing the internet. Right? How many of y'all are in favor of that? Right? I mean, if what I said is exactly what it is, I'm not gonna hold you to this, right? Right. Okay. So the next question is this: so we have local sales tax, right? Counties, the state, we have sales tax, and we also, if you purchase goods online, there's not a sales tax that's automatically levied on it. Now, how many of you? And so what you have to do is have enabling legislation from the federal government to allow states and municipalities to collect sales tax directly through internet purchases. Okay? How many of y'all would think that that's the right approach? Raise your hand.
Let me say that would
Now,
that would
let me
amount
ask
to
a
about
second
$700 million in revenue to the state of North Carolina.
Sure. And I'm going to ask a second question. How many of y'all knew that when you purchase goods online, that you actually, when you do your state taxes, you have to account for those goods and remit money to the state government? Right? Okay, some of y'all. Okay.
Now ask how many do.
No, I'm not going
I
to.
know you're not going to answer that.
No, I'm not going to do that. So I'm not with the State Department of Revenue, nor am I with the IRS. So anyway, so I asked this question, okay? Now that you know that, how many of y'all would support enabling legislation so that when you buy goods online, the state would levy the sales tax directly from you during that purchase? Okay. Similar numbers, right? Okay. Am I stating it fairly?
No, you're
Okay.
certainly not.
Oh,
You're biasing it to your view.
No, I actually
It is
don't
a
want
tax,
to
it
do
is
so.
a
Since you
tax
asked
that
the
is
question.
required to be paid by everybody, except because people don't have to pay it, they don't. It would be like saying, let's forget withholding tax from the IRS, and at the end of the year, you just tell the federal government how much you made, and here's the tax that I owe you.
So, sir,
That would never happen.
I've heard your question. I wanted to ask that question and I was trying to frame it the fairest way I could, and I thought I was trying to do that. So for me, I've got some skepticism on any new taxes,
It's
period.
not new, it's not new tax.
Hold on, you ask a question, let me answer.
Well, don't say it's a new tax, because it's not.
Well, you don't know what my next sentence was gonna be, right? You don't know what my next sentence is gonna be, because did I say, did I give you whether or not it's a new tax?
You
No.
just said it's not,
So,
it's a new
sir,
tax.
okay, thank you, you've asked your question. Okay, the answer is I will read that bill, and I will let you know how I'm gonna vote on it.
That's a side step.
Well, then, here's the answer, sir.
What is your view?
By making 23 million jobs. So why aren't we going the hard way by going the easy way by making these jobs?
Okay, well, there are 42 jobs bills the House of Representatives has passed in a bipartisan way. They're sitting in the Senate. Look, there's frustration in both parties about what's happening in Washington. But I'll say this, that was a Republican House, Republican Senate, and Democrat President that put in place a balanced budget.
Yeah, but he's the one,
He personally created all those jobs. I
He's the
think
one
it's
out-
American people that helped create those jobs. And so to your point,
okay, but I'm just saying, what I've read and what I've studied is that he's the one and his people pushed for these jobs to be made with the help of McHenry and that group. They're the one who balanced the budget. Now, I give credit to the Republicans for being there, but why aren't we looking at how they did it compared to the way you guys want to do it now? I mean, I have friends, I know people who are sitting on the sidelines, waiting to find a good job, and there's bills sitting in. If you want to compromise, you go over to Mitch McConnell, grab him by his nose, bring him over and say, let's sit down and solve the problem.
Harry Reid is the majority leader. of
Harry
the Senate.
Reid is, so do it.
And I would like to grab him by the nose.
Harry Reid says he'd be happy to work, but every time he tries to get something passed, the Republicans come up and filibuster. You filibustered more times in the last 6 years than ever before, because, like Mitch McConnell says, I don't like the president, so maybe we can watch our president, so he's screwing everything up. Why aren't we working together to stop this garbage trap?
Right. Okay, so your point about Bill Clinton creating jobs, right?
I'm talking about his time as president. He gets the credit for it because he was the man in charge. All right? He's the one who balanced the budget, had a surplus. You Republicans gave the surplus to the rich. We need it for a war.
Okay, so look, if that's the case, okay, and if you look at the Clinton, the 1990s economy and the 1980s economy, you have a Democrat president or a Republican president. So let's walk through that. Ronald Reagan in the recoveries in the early 80s created more jobs in 1 month than this president has created in 1 year. Okay? The job growth in the 1990s, due to a number of things, but there was more of a spirit of bipartisanship. And I've tried to work with the president. I have tried to work with the president. In fact, 2 years ago and 2 months ago, I was in a Rose Garden signing ceremony of the Jobs Act. And I wrote a chunk of that bill that was signed in a bipartisan way through a Republican House, a Democrat Senate, a Democrat President signs. And so you can have bipartisanship. I think what is lacking at this moment, unfortunately, is what Clinton was willing to do and Reagan was willing to do. Reagan worked with a Democrat House of Representatives and a Republican Senate. Bill Clinton worked with a Republican House and a Republican Senate. And I don't think the Republicans of the 1990s like Bill Clinton more than the Republicans of this year like Barack Obama. But the difference was presidential leadership. And that has been severely lacking under this president. To say it's only about executive action, that's the only way he can get things done, is wrong. He had 3 major pieces of legislation he passed. He got the stimulus in the first month he was in office. $1 trillion was spent. He had Dodd-Frank, which is the Obamacare of financial regulation. And he had Obamacare. He was able to pass legislation. He's simply unwilling to work with Republicans. Now, having said that, Republicans share a portion of the blame because we have to work with this president, even if he's not willing to leave. And so this week, rather than simply let August go and this humanitarian border crisis be left unchecked, we put forward a plan, a reasonable plan, to deal with this border crisis. Not because we think the president's going to adopt it, even though portions of that he spoke in favor of at the very beginning of this crisis and said we have to change that 2008 law that people are taking advantage of, and then he walked it back. His Secretary of Homeland Security did the exact same thing. Well, we have that change in there. And if he walks away from it, we still have a bill there that can help take on and solve this border crisis. And so I'm willing to lead. I'm willing to take that step. That's why we put forward a balanced budget. Though we disagree on that budget, I voted for it. And I think it's better that we solve this fiscal crisis that we're facing rather than just simply let it go on.
Well, I agree with you. I agree with a lot of your stuff. But I don't agree is that when you say, when Obama inherited, when he came to office from Bush, was nothing compared to what Reagan inherited from Carter. Nothing. All right? Okay?
I would disagree with you there.
Oh, okay. All right. I'm older than you are, so I was there when it happened, so I do remember most of it.
I mean, I was alive then.
Yeah, but I mean,
But about that, I mean,
the point I'm trying to say to you is that when you say a comment about this president not trying to leave, he is trying to leave. But every time he leaves, he gets hit in the face with the wall.
you think Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton had a better relationship
You got John Boehner.
than John Boehner and this president? I mean, I think
John
probably
Boehner.
similar.
John Boehner has 57 Tea Partiers that he's scared to death of. Instead of coming to the table, oh my God, we hear all the time, they are. He will not do anything to work together to solve problems. He runs over and says, I'll work with you, then he runs back and says, no, I won't. Okay?
Well, I've heard you, sir. We got other people on.
All right, I'm on.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a nice day.
I'm Michael Carlback. I live about 10 minutes from here. I'm awfully glad that you're here because I finally am able to get your response since no one in your office ever responds to my email. I've written at least 5 times about healthcare in general and specifically about my own and my family's experience with catastrophic health costs from the disease cystic fibrosis.
Yes.
But no one in your office appears to want to hear from me or respond. And I think it's
Say
very
your name
peculiar.
again, so I can look through my records to see, because
I'll do
I'm
there.
sorry.
Michael Carlback. And I just don't know, I don't understand why a congressman who says he wants to hear from his constituents won't respond when his constituents write.
Well, sir, there's no excuse for a non-response. The buck stops with me. We get, though we get thousands of letters in a year, that is not fair to you. I'll go through my records and see what happened, see why we dropped the ball. Thank you. Mr. Carlback, one of my staffers will work on it now to see, okay?
Yeah.
Thank you. And my apologies. Thank you, appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Annabelle Motley. I'm from Nashville, North Carolina. I'm a rising senior and I'm applying to the Naval Academy. So
Excellent.
I'm hoping to get your nomination.
Thank you. Where are you at school?
I'm at TC Robertson.
Excellent.
And my question is, with the international crisis that is related to our positions, what do you believe the future of military development and expansion is, since that is my prospective career?
Thank you. Thank you. What's your name again?
Annabelle Motley.
Nice to meet you, Annabelle. So this is the, if I may say, thank you. All right, we've got 47 people in attendance, so just got my notes. And Annabelle, thank you for your question. Let me say one thing. when you run for Congress or you're a part of this process, people don't talk about, you think, well, it's about legislating, crafting bills and listening to constituents doing this. They don't talk about the most positive aspect of it, which is we have a nomination process for all the service academies, all West Point, Naval Academy, Air Force, Merchant Marine, so on. So what's so encouraging is we have all of this doom and gloom that we adults talk about, right? That these kids these days, they don't understand, you know, it's like this next generation isn't as good as like we were when we were kids, right? And then I get to sit down and we have an interview process in my office in order to get my nomination. I have a number of veterans from every county in the district, and they're part of my military advisory committee. And we interview all these kids. We go through their packet, we interview them. And what happens is, after that day of interviews, I am more encouraged about the future of our country than I was when I started. They are so impressive, so incredible. You have a nice young lady that you would say, oh, well, she's very, very nice, she's smart, she's with it, and very fashionable, right? And she wants to serve our country. I mean, isn't that just wonderful? So, thank you, and thank you for coming. So, about international policy. At the moment, we have a number of crises around the world. You have the reemergence of Russia and trying to flex their muscle with Ukraine, and also trying to use their natural resources to hold Europe hostage. We have Iran trying to get a nuclear weapon. We have the Arab Spring that has taken roots, and the only country where it's had a positive result is Tunisia. That is better off after the Arab Spring than it was before. We have this issue with Gaza, shooting rockets on an almost daily basis into Israel, and now Israel taking action against those militants and terrorists in Gaza. You have, and then we have the rise of ISIS in Iraq. There's a challenge right now. We have a budget crisis. We have pressure on all areas of our budget. We have been involved in policing the world since World War II, and yet we have the third and fourth largest economies in the country who have not. Japan and Germany. We need to ask more of our allies to do and help and protect. That's number one. Number two, we still have to have a presence. Now, there's a big desire for us to pull back after a long and arduous war in Iraq and Afghanistan. But there is a way to pull back, yet still have strength. And what we project is weakness there. And the rise of ISIS, which is connected with Iran and funded through Hezbollah, is a very challenging issue in and of itself. But it arises based off of projecting weakness, not strength. So they don't see a residual force in Iraq for the United States. They don't see us being able to come back in swiftly and push them back. So they're rising and moving to the capital. And so what we have to do is be able to project strength, but not with such a heavy hand. And that balance is a reordering of our foreign policy and our defense policy. And there's a way for us to do it. We are still the largest player. We're the largest economy in the world. We still are hugely desirable for people to want to live here and participate in our society. And we still have the most advanced technology in the planet. Only person who rivals us in terms of defense entering into the service at a very important time in our nation's history. And I think we won't really know the full scale of it for another 20 years on what is happening at the current moment. So thank you, and thank you for your question. Our one foreign policy question today so far. Sorry.
My name is Lisa Baldwin. I'm a member of the Buncombe County Board of Education. I reside in Fairview, North Carolina. I have a question question about the Common Core standards. As you know, the North Carolina State Legislature recently passed legislation to set aside those standards in favor of more robust and rigorous state standards for our children. I just wanted to know if you feel there's a role that Congress can play in stopping the Common Core standards, and substituting, more rigorous, leaving it to the states to decide their standards, and what your personal position is on Common Core.
I voted to reject Common Core. I think and so what we have now in the state of North Carolina, going back to the 1990s, we have state-based testing regimes, and we have a state-based curriculum. That's where it's best done. And then what we had in the early 2000s with No Child Left Behind is a layering of federal testing on top of this state-based testing. So we have children that are testing and testing to tell the state the one thing and the federal government something else. I think the money is best spent at the state level and the local level, and when somebody sees you in the grocery store, they can hold you accountable for their children's education, and maybe you can improve it and adapt and change based on the community's needs. And so I want power out of Washington back to the state and back to the local level, because we can have that delivery much better at the local level than we can out of Washington. But one other thing I would mention is this. The Department of Education has just shy of 2,000 people in it in Washington. The average salary is twice the average salary of a teacher in the classroom. You want to talk about a mismatch of priorities. We're funding people at desks rather than teachers in classrooms. And I think it's so important that we fund teachers in classrooms, and we empower parents and teachers to make wise decisions for the education of those children, not politicians in Washington. Thank you. And thank you for your service on the school board as well. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Congressman McHenry, I'm Josh Badenhorst, work at Art Space Charter School in Swananoa. And
thank you for hosting us last year. It was fantastic. And love your program.
Come back, yeah.
Yes, I love your program at Art Space. It is so great, and thank you again for the tour.
Absolutely. So I had 3 options for you. I'm down to 2 now. The first one was education, which you kind of took. So
okay.
I'll let you choose energy or economy, which one you want.
Go for them both. It's fine.
That would be like an omnibus question. I know. Okay, so January 7th was coldest day on record in a long time in North Carolina. Highest energy demand ever. And Joel Olson of O2 Energy made the comment recently in Business in North Carolina about how Duke Energy calls him up. They were planning on doing some, they're a solar power company. They said they were planning on doing some routine maintenance, and Duke Energy calls us, we need every kilowatt hour that we can on the grid. I'm wondering, I know there's probably a lot of people in this room that would like to be more energy independent in their own lives, have maybe solar on their house, things like that, but I also noticed that our tax credits were doing such a thing, are going to be rolling out of here in 2016. Since the time of the Great Recession, I think a lot of people's ability to put their capital towards something like that, a project like that, both businesses and schools and residences, have not been able to necessarily put the capital towards that sort of thing. But I see that bringing up a little bit in the next couple of years. Would you be in favor of extending those tax credits, or
yes.
I see that as being somewhere where you can maybe work together with the other
yes.
side.
I've supported them in the past, and will continue to support them.
Cool.
My approach is very simple. It's not for me to determine what you want to use for energy, right? It should be what the demand is, and so anyway, let me respond. My approach is all the above. So from nuclear to wind to solar, I think we should have a diverse mix, and the greater the diversity, the better off and the more secure we're going to be as a nation. The fact is that we still import energy into the United States when we should be energy independent. So while I do support using our natural resources, the natural resources that are on public lands, those funds should go directly into innovation, the next generation of technology, so that maybe we have an option other than a car that burns petroleum. And with that mix, we'll bring down prices. And I think that gives people better options. And so Right now, what we need to do is encourage a more diversity in terms of energy production. I think it's very important for our economic growth in North Carolina, but in the United States. About solar, right? There's a lot of feedback and a lot of discussion among a number of my friends about solar. Well, that was your decision, but what we should have is an encouragement so that people could afford to do this and have a better mix. It means that we have lower electricity bills because in the state of North Carolina, Duke Energy comes in and sets rates based off their expenses. If their expenses lower, meaning they don't have to build a new nuclear power plant, it's very expensive, we don't pay for it. So it's better to have that mix. And so I'm for an all-of-the-above approach, soup to nuts. I think it's important that we encourage that enhancement change mix.
It's interesting, about $2,500 a kilowatt hour to create new nuclear, and about $2,500 a kilowatt hour to create storage for solar. So it's really prices come down.
Yeah, another question
I
about the
did.
economy.
This is about the economy. Since I guess it's probably about 2009, we've seen the monetary base do some interesting things. About 16 times what it was going into 2009. With employment getting closer, we're getting closer to full employment. Obviously not there yet. With some other market indicators saying that the economy is starting to speed up velocity-wise. What in your opinion, can Congress do in terms of instructing the Fed about their policy in order to sort of create a soft landing? Of the people in the world who I think have a tough job, Janet Hoyle's probably number one up there.
Yeah. Well, about the Federal Reserve, Ron Paul had a simple idea that we should audit the Federal Reserve. Right? I'm in favor of that. I supported it then, and I think we need to have an update to that now. We passed a bill out of the Financial Services Committee last week. We'll vote on it hopefully in September. That reforms the Federal Reserve and ensures that monetary policy, rather than being at the will of a handful of people, actually follow basic rules and the basic rules of economics, namely the Taylor Rule, which adheres monetary policy to some very understandable strict standards. So you don't have quantitative easing 2, and then this Operation Twist, a series of debasing our currency in order to try to spur growth. It means that if you have savings, your savings are worth less now than they were 2 years ago because of one body and one body only, and that's the Federal Reserve. I think that's not acceptable. So, yes, thank you for bringing that up. Taylor Rule.
Hi, I'm Nellie Mahoney, and I live in OT, 5 minutes from one of the greatest VAs.
Absolutely.
My husband was there and with cancer and in hospice, and I can't say enough about them. If you want to know how it was, check it out. I just, it's hard for me to read. Tom here. How many bills has the House passed out of the House, and job bills that are languishing on Harry Reid's desk because he's so busy at the podium letting me know that I'm a racist, I'm anti-immigrant, I want women and children to die. So that's
You personally?
and then I do.
It seems so nice, though.
About the immigration.
Well, first, about OT, right?
Yeah.
We have a great facility here with wonderful people, and they are delivering. We have the folks that work in the Veterans Administration. When you come to Western North Carolina, every person in that building cares about those veterans.
Yes, me too.
And so I thank them for their service because they're much more about the mission. From the janitor to the head of the hospital, they're only there because they love and care about these veterans and want to take care of them.
Yes.
We also have we've had some bad actors in the VA though. And you had these folks that, for example, in Phoenix, that were manipulating the system and hurting veterans in order to get a bonus, right? I mean, the most disgusting thing you can imagine. And we were able to pass, we were talking about bipartisanship, we were able to pass a bill out of the House and the Senate. The President should be signing it or already did, that has reforms. And it says if you're on the waiting list for over 30 days, you will get, you'll be able to go and access a local health care facility. If you cannot be taken care of within 30 days of the VA, you will have that access. I think that's very important, and it should have been the policy from the very beginning. We also audit the place from top to bottom to make sure that we get the bad actors out, we get the bad systems out, we deliver for the veterans. About immigration. This is a major crisis at the border. And there was a lot of debate because the President can fix this problem by following the laws that are written. Simple as that.
Right.
And he can also state very clearly that if you come to the border, you will be returned home. It's a humanitarian crisis as well because these children are being sent by their parents. They're not making this decision on their own. It's their parents that hear the President say, if you come here, you'll be legalized. It's a wrong message. The number one thing he can do is to say, no, if you come, you will be returned home. There are other very basic things where he has used such broad discretion that he's freed a number of illegal immigrants in this country from prosecution simply by issuing executive decree. I think that's wrong, and Eric Holder should be held accountable as well. So a very basic thing, very reasonable thing would be for the President to obey the law. And then going forward, we have to have sensible reforms to our immigration system that I outlined before.
Well, what I wanted to mention about immigration, I watch these animals, see how people talk on the floor. That's why I made that comment about how I am perceived. But you said the children are being treated humanely. Now, recently, Glenn Beck was down and Ted Cruz and Rick Goma went down with him. And from what I understood, those children are not being treated humanely when they are here, when they have come to us. A lot of them are being put in the foster system, and I know you just passed a series of bills on American-born children being put into, the sex slave. And the biggest problem is the foster system. And I missed those debates, I missed how you passed those bills, but from what I understand.
Yes.
And Sharon Bass is on the 73 bills in the mail, because I haven't been doing that. They are not being treated humanely down there.
Right,
I'm glad you didn't go down because you're about to have a baby. I don't know if you had any conversation with me or Ted Cruz.
I spent
as
plenty
to
of time
what-
with Louis this last week. Plenty of time.
What they have seen and what you're not allowed to see.
Plenty
I
of
know
time.
that they are separating siblings. I know that.
Well, why don't we talk about this afterwards? Because there's a lot more to it. I understand your concern. And no one can treat a child as a parent should treat a child. And when you have parents, the most humane thing is to return them to those parents. As long as they're not abusive and,
I think our government's being abusive to the
Yes, I
children
agree.
that are only here.
We've got two more, and we'll wrap it up.
Hi, Christina Merrill, Fairview, and my question is quick but important. As you know, our state has been successful in passing some great voter reform laws, which were much needed. It's a step in the right direction. However, the United States is now suing our state over these laws. I wanted to know what your thoughts were on that, and if there was anything that you can do as our congressman in this matter.
Well, that is a suit brought by the Department of Justice and Eric Holder. I think it is a very reasonable thing that when you show up to do something as sacred and as important to our democracy as vote, that perhaps showing an identification would be a reasonable and just thing. And so the idea that you can show up, when you board a plane, you have to show your identification, yet when you vote, you do not, seems not right. And so I know there's a lot of concerns because we have folks, you know, you all might know some folks that, you know, their birth certificate is just a ledger, a writing in the family Bible. So there is a way to take care and make sure that those in our society have a means of identification in order to use their right and vote. And I think we have a balanced way of doing that, and I think it's important that we do have that voter identification as a part of our democracy. So the question of their lawsuit, you know, that's an executive branch decision, as it traditionally has been. And I think courts will hopefully, I believe, rightly decide that showing ID is a reasonable thing. Thank you. Last question. You're the closer here.
Wayne Stanko from Asheville, with regard to the previous comment. My wife and I just installed 30 solar panels over our home, and I'm very thankful for those state and federal tax breaks.
You push that back to the grid, or
Yeah, to the grid.
what's your power bill?
Well, the first one had to come in there, so if we don't even lie to work. So, but it's designed to replace 90% of the project.
Pretty amazing.
And like I said, without those tax credits, we couldn't have afforded it, so it's good to keep those going. My question is, every poll taken says that the American people's opinion of the job Congress has done is the worst in history. Why do you think that is?
Because they're rational.
I don't understand that.
Because American people, you know, they say, no matter all the marketing Coca-Cola did for New Coke, you tasted it, you didn't like it. American people know much more about the ins and outs of Washington, and they like it even less as a result. I have to go, you've elected me, and you send me to Washington to represent you. And each week, I go up there and do my best to make sure that I represent the people, my bosses in this room and across Western North Carolina, and represent their values, their principles, and what I believe the majority, the vast majority, want. And yet we haven't gotten the results. It is so frustrating in this process that we've not gotten results. So when you see a divide between the Republican House and the Democrat Senate, and you don't see any give, if I was called on that poll, I would say that I don't approve of Congress. I want to get results for my bosses at home, for the American people. And even if we have little pockets of prosperity that are popping up right now, most families in this country are worse off now than they were, you name the time frame, right? And I don't want to be partisan to pick a time frame, but is your family better off now than it was 10 years ago? Well, do you think, let me ask you this question, do you think your children are going to inherit an America that was as good as the America you inherited? Raise your hand.
No.
Right? Well, the vast majority say no. I want to leave this little girl that my wife's about to give birth to a better country than I was born into. Blessed enough to be born into. And we're not doing that right now. And there's got to be steps along the way to get there. But we agree with the goal. And I don't see it. But that doesn't mean I don't try. And the reason why I'm optimistic, the reason why I keep doing that, keep pushing it, and not step aside and say, you let somebody else do it. I still think we can do it. I don't think it's all lost. I think you have to just keep trying, figure out where you can get consensus. This border bill this last week was just a case in point. We had some some of my Republican friends that said it wasn't good enough. We couldn't get the votes for the first bill, and we worked through all those changes that we need to make the policy better. We got a better bill as a result of it. And so some of my friends were saying, well, those jerks are holding up the bill. They won't vote for it. Well, they didn't want to vote for it because they didn't think it was good. It was right. So you had to deal with their challenges, the problems they saw in the bill, and fix them. And once you fix the problems, they voted for it. You can work through it, but you have to keep trying. And you have to deal with people maybe you don't like. But you really don't care about my daily life. You just, I mean, I don't mean that, I don't mean that in a mean way. But you like me to do a job. If I'm having a good day or a bad day, I didn't get enough sleep the night before, that's my problem. It's not your problem. So you don't care a lick on, how much, am I, do I feel good about my job? No, you want to get results. And so I'm going to keep trying. And I'm going to sit down with people that maybe I completely disagree with. But there is a way to get consensus with the majority. Not everyone, you're not going to please everyone all the time, but get some rational policy done. And respect the people that disagree with you, but you don't have to be disagreeable about it. Right? So, I think it can still happen, and I'm going to keep trying. That's all I can tell you. Thank you. Thank you. Y'all had a number of questions, and I really do appreciate y'all taking the time. I'm sorry it's not a convenient time. I sincerely apologize.
Maybe it is important. It's probably already here. So before you come, I
Hold
was
on a
going to make a
second,
statement
hold on.
that would make your job a lot easier. Forget trying to make a new law, enforce the ones you have, like lock the people up that hiring these illegals. If there was no jobs available, people would quit hiring them. They'd go back home on their own, you wouldn't need a fence down there to stop it. And that's just a simple way to do it.
That's enforcing the law.
And it's also, just what we already have.
I feel that the government should be involved in bringing people into this country that have the Ebola virus.
Pardon?
We're bringing U.S. citizens back into this country for being treated with Ebola virus.
We have
Should we be
Americans.
bringing them back into this country, or should we be treating them overseas?
Well, I'll address this, and I need to wrap up. But about this, and yes, ma'am.
May I finish this on a lighter note?
Well, let me answer Ebola, then I'll let you be lighter.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
All right? Now, we have two missionaries that were in Africa. One's a medical doctor, one was not. They contracted Ebola virus. I'm very concerned about bringing such an infectious disease like that to our country. What happened was, the folks down in Atlanta, Emory University Hospital, they have an infectious disease ward, and they handle these cases on a regular basis. They have an airplane that is able to pick up one person. It only has enough room because of the technology. Well, that would be a travesty.
Terrorists would love to shoot that down.
Okay. Look, I only can solve so many things, but I'll just tell you, there are systems and controls for this. There are systems and controls for this, and I believe that we're safe. And if we're not safe, I would not be speaking in favor of bringing it. Yes, ma'am. You'll have the.
I'd just like to let you all know about our VA a little bit. My husband and I have been volunteers down there for the last 15, 16 years. For a long time, it was a weekly volunteer, and now we're just on the Voluntary Services Committee. And we're also on the Executive Committee of Voluntary Services. The minute this thing broke out, within a week, they had a team from Washington that came down here, unexpected. They went through this hospital with a fine-tooth comb. They interviewed doctors, nurses, patients, people in the prosthetics department, everywhere, just off the top of their heads. And they gave us an excellent record. And also, we have that nice little Veterans Restoration Headquarters down there.
Well,
For all the veterans, and that's one place, I don't know many in the U.S. that do that.
It is a model for the rest of the world.
Another thing that we do down there, and most people don't do it, and the other VA is starting to pick up on it. Our VA started this about 3 or 4 years ago.
when the people come in, they have to have a checkup the next day for something. They don't have a place to stay. Many of them don't have the money when they come in from the hinterlands in here. So we put them up in a motel. We have a contract with the motel. We put them up there. If they would stay in the hospital, accordingly, it would be like $1,500 whatever dollars per night that the government would be charged for this. So we put them in there for $65 a night, and they get their transportation back and forth, the free breakfast. And we've saved millions of dollars just this little hospital alone to the VA system. So that's all I want to say.
Let's end on that high note, because the Veterans Restoration, so it says Catawba Buncombe Cooperative, Christian Cooperative.
Yes, it's ABCC.
ABCC, I can never get it out. What they do, though, is the model for seeking out homeless vets in our community, and not even in our community, from around the region, and ensuring that they get the care that they need, get put back on their feet, deal with their substance abuse problem if they have that problem and challenge in life, and then establish with some moral foundation a life. And I had the honor to go through that facility and meet the gentlemen that are there, and it was extraordinary. And what I recognize when I walk into the VA, when I walk into that ministry or that program, the volunteers that make all the difference in the world, that take care of these that have served us in harm's way. And so thank you for being a volunteer. Thank you and your husband.
My honor.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. I appreciate your feedback. Y'all are my bosses. You've elected me to represent you, and even if we don't agree on every issue, it's important that I hear from you and get your feedback. And so thank you for taking the time to be here, and God bless.